Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome first timers to the new format of the NetBox Community monthly meetup here. This is a newer format for us still. This is the second time we're doing this. So if you joined us for the first time around, thanks for coming back. If this is your first time joining us, I hope you find it engaging. Just to kind of give you a brief recap, the way these calls used to run, essentially it was a YouTube live stream where Jeremy Stretch would come on and possibly with a guest or two, just have more of a conversation or a one-way conversation into the YouTube live stream. But this year we've started to be a little more interactive. Obviously, we're in one big Zoom room here. So let's try to be, mindful that we are in those rooms and try to control our mics where possible, because we do have control of our mics because we do want some engagements. A bit later on, we're going to have 3 presenters come on and share some cool NetBox related stuff. And at the end of those, we'll have a little bit of time for question and answers for each presentation. But before we get to that, the very first meeting that we had last month was very exciting. I don't know if you had an opportunity to go back and watch we had 48 people join us live, which was exciting, just having that many people all in the same room. And after about 45 minutes in, we still had 42 people with us. So apparently it was pretty engaging. Hope it stays that way. The replay was posted online on our YouTube channel, and there have been about 1,000 views for all of that. So the 3 presenters will be breaking their presentations up so that you can go back and watch those. And between those 3 broken up presentations and the full event itself, we've had over 1,000 views so far. And to kind of put that in perspective, I just looked back and found the September 2020 event, where it was, again, that YouTube live stream. And we've had almost 800 views on that. So again, it seems like this new format's working for really for everyone. So any feedback, we're going to have a survey a little bit later on that you can fill out. Obviously, after, you can contact us through our various social channels, through the videos. Once they get posted, we'll advertise those out as well. But it's great to be here again and kicking off another meeting. So we're going to go ahead and start with a quick update on version 3.5 beta, which is going to be released next week. Jeremy, if I could get you for a minute to just touch on that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got, for anyone who's not aware, NetBox follows a 4-month release cycle. So that's basically we put out a minor release. So it's like 3.4, 3.5, 3.6 every 4 months. So the next one is coming up in April. Owing to the fact that we need to have 3.5 released by the end of April, means we need to have a beta for that, ideally 30 days or so prior, which falls into next week. So I'm currently going through wrapping up everything we need to do to get that squared away, all of the many feature requests. There's a lot of cool stuff coming from that. Some highlights, remote data sync, so being able to pull in data from external sources and store those as local data objects within NetBox for reference by things like export templates and config contexts and all that stuff. We're also introducing a native configuration rendering ability. So if you have a repo already where you've got those config templates pulled in, I think someone's got their mic unmuted. If you could, appreciate it. So if you've got a repo that has config templates already, you can set up remote data sync to automatically pull those in and then render those using data directly within NetBox. So that's pretty exciting. We've got some other cool stuff like custom dashboards and a bunch more coming as well. So feel free, be sure to check that out. Again, that beta should be out sometime early next week. We're shooting for Monday or Tuesday, so the 27th or 28th of March.
It doesn't sound like a huge thing in there, but me just personally, I'm really looking forward to the custom dashboards. Sometimes I see environments where that it's an IPAM heavy environment, or it's just a DSIM heavy environment, and all of the zeros up there I mean, not that it's bad to see them, but it's going to be really nice to be able to sort of build out that dashboard in a view that works for the person, for the departments, and it's going to be per person, right? Like each person's going to be able to set their own settings.
Yeah, you'll be able to define or the admin will be able to define a default dashboard, and then every user will by default inherit that, but then they can customize it to as they see fit. And we'll have basically the standard layout. We can move things around. You have little widgets, so you could show like an arbitrary count of different object types. You could have notes and stuff stuck up there. So there will be lots of cool stuff. And I'm sure once you open the beta, we're going to get tons and tons of additional feature requests around that. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate you getting into that. Did you want to go into the device library?
Oh yeah,
in terms of
sure. Yeah. So real quick, one thing we've been kind of going back and forth about, we being the maintainers of the project, is whether or not to incorporate elevation images in the device type library. So if you don't know, real quick, part of what we do around NetBox is maintain a community curated device type libraries. This is static definitions of literally thousands of different models of devices that are out there. So Cisco, Juniper switches, et cetera, that kind of thing. And people can take those definitions and import them directly to NetBox instead of having to manually recreate those. And one open item that's been under discussion for a while is whether to extend that to incorporate also elevation drawings. We've had some, concerns about that in the past, primarily around copyright, but it seems like we're getting to the point now where I think we're comfortable merging those, and we have a couple PRs open right now where people are adding those. So what's cool about that is if you are populating device types from the library, you can bring in not only the definition that has all the interfaces and console ports and et cetera, but also the elevation drawings that will populate in NetBox as well, so that when you look at a picture of a rack, you're seeing not just a colored block, but a visual representation of those individual devices. So that's pretty cool. I think we're making progress on that. And I hope to have that built out here, over the coming months. So if you're interested, by all means, check it out. And if you're a vendor, by all, especially, please, whatever you can do to provide those images and make it a little bit easier for us to get in there would be greatly appreciated.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. For the next month, we're going to see the NetBox user survey coming out. If you've not seen that before, it may not seem like a large way that you can help out, but we frequently get questions of how can I help out NetBox, the application, the community, how can I contribute? And there are often no code ways that people can help out. And this is kind of one of those ways where we probe's not the right word. We ask our community a little bit about who you are, what industry you're in, the size of your deployment, basically to get a snapshot of NetBox users out there, compile all that and return that back out to the community to get a sense for how NetBox being used, what industries it's being used, what features are being used, just different things along that line. So pay attention to our socials next month. You'll see that coming out, and it'll be great to do a check-in with the community and just sort of see how things are going.
Yeah, just on that note, real quick, I want to add. Sorry, one of the inherent challenges of an open source project is that we many times don't know who our users are. So unless people are actually active, there's no like phone home ability built into the software or anything like that. There's no registration process, obviously, to download the software. So unless people are actually active in the community on the NetDev Slack or in GitHub, we often don't know they exist. So this is one of the crucial ways that we rely upon as maintainers and as community leaders to get that feedback, explicitly solicited feedback from end users to find out more about how people are using the application, what they want to see from it. So this is far and away the best opportunity to convey what you want to see out of NetBox for the coming year. So as Jordan mentioned, that'll be going out next month, so keep an eye out. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. Thank you. One last quick thing, and then we'll go ahead and get started off with our presenters. This past week at NINOG in New York, which if you're not familiar with the NOGs, any of the network operator group meetings, they're basically conferences. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger, but I had an opportunity to present at NINOG last week and did a presentation on using NetBox and Ansible and some other things around there. Going to post a re-recorded version of my presentation in the next week or so. For anyone who's ever in a public speaking position, make sure that you prep your presentation if you're going to be attached to a projector to be viewable at 800 by 600 instead of whatever your monitor resolution is. Because of that, I'm going to have to do a replay rather than actually the recording from the event, but look for that in the next week or so. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start off our shares. We're going to start with Jeremy Schulman. And like I said, we'll have some time for Q&A at the very end there. But Jeremy's going to be showing off a bit of how they control their VoIP phones and IPTV devices across MLB's, I guess, network. Jeremy, I'll let you come on and describe it a little bit better, but if you're ready, go ahead, kick off your screen share and take us away.
All right. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? All right.
Loud and
I'm gonna share my whole screen. So hopefully this isn't too crazy for everybody. And what we're doing with NetBox is beyond storing the devices themselves, we're storing devices that connect to our network. So I'm going to go through kind of like the VoIP phone use case in particular. And really the primary users here are our ballpark operations folks. So we have a Chatops system that you can kind of see here over on the left, where it acts as a self-service portal for those who need to interact with the network without having to, say, open up a support ticket or a snow ticket. And so the idea here is that somebody in the ballpark team, they might need to do something with a VoIP phone, like, see its status or bounce a port. And so what they would do is they would go into, this is Slack, and this is an app in Slack that I've developed. And, we're going to click on something here. And as I'm clicking through this, it's interacting with NetBox directly. So I can say, oh, I want the Atlanta Braves. And then what's going to happen is it's going to pull the locations for where phones are, and that is maintained using NetBox and these relationships for locations. So here on the right side, you can kind of see I have all these locations here. And then if I picked a given, site, it's going to pull the phones that happen to be in that location. And again, we're looking at the device properties of what's at these locations. I can see that I have, for example, VoIP phones, and their cabling is managed inside of NetBox, so that if I know I want to see something about this particular phone, for example, I'll pop this out so we can kind of play around with it. I might want to get the status of this particular phone, and I can see exactly which switch and interface is on it. And when I click, get port info, I can see I got a message from the app. And if I click on this to see the details, it'll tell me, this is what I've got, what its status is, what the MAC address that we've learned on it. And then they can even kind of click in and see like a chart. I don't know if this is going to pop up and you guys can see this, but this is kind of like the dashboard for that particular phone. They can see how it's behaving. So the whole mechanism really is to allow, people who are not part of the networking team to interact with the network because it's part of their daily jobs. And there's things that they can do, like, they can bounce a port, they can run a cable test if the port supports a TDR mechanism. And this is one example of how we use NetBox, beyond just devices. We manage the relationship of objects and their cabling so that we can kind of get this particular, user experience. There's one other use case that I'll cover that is similar, but slightly different. One has to do with power usage. So we have another application for the power management team. And if they want to see power usage for a given ballpark, for example, if I pick on Atlanta Braves again, I can see, these are all the racks that we have. And if I were to look at these racks, from within NetBox, I have associated with that PDU devices, and each of those have mechanisms to tell me how many PDUs each rack has. And so if I click execute here, what this is going to do is it's actually using the information in NetBox to talk directly to the PDUs, and it's pulling power, right off the box, the PDUs, and showing information that, might be useful for the people who are dealing with power management. And the each rack has like an A and a B side, so we can kind of see information about how the power is balanced. And we're using context data for the devices in NetBox to store what the actual power allocations allow for, so we can see whether or not we're overpowered or underpowered. And each of these are just a graphical, table showing each of the devices that are plugged in and how much power draw they're taking. I'm not going to zoom in on this, but these are just, tabular reports for each of the devices. So I'll just take a stop here because I covered quite a bit pretty fast. But again, the idea is using NetBox for more than just networking devices.
It's pretty awesome, Jeremy. I don't know if it's possible for you to estimate, but how long did it take you to put that together? Like, you just pick one of those, like let's say PowerBot.
Once you kind of get into the hang of building a Slack application, it's, a few weeks worth of coding effort, to develop and test it. But there are a lot of libraries that Slack as a company provides. So they have their SDKs that you can use, and they're really good. And then it's just kind of learning their SDK to understand how the widgets and buttons work. So there's a bit of a learning curve there if you've never done it. But a few weeks for sure.
Okay. Cool. Looks like we had a couple hands up there. So how about Brian? Let's hear what you got.
Yeah, given that you have so many sites, is this the backend for this app hosted on-prem in a data center, or is it cloud managed, or do you have servers at each ballpark to run the local commands that talk to the switches?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when an app needs to speak directly to a device, like a networking device, we have them on secured subnets, like so with ACLs and so forth. And so those apps have to run, on an environment that has access to those subnets. And we've experimented with kind of different approaches. But what we do is we have our backends running on what you would call a jump server in that particular case. In other apps like this PowerBot app, since those devices are not on the same kind of subnetting mechanism, we can run PowerBot, for example, in the cloud, and they can talk to any device that's cloud reachable, through our private cloud. So we kind of, we pick and choose how we want to deploy these apps, but they're essentially just containers, Docker containers running in, whether it's a jump server environment or a cloud native environment, we can move them around if we have to.
That's pretty slick. Austin, looks like you got your hand up as well.
Yeah, hey, thanks. So are you modeling all of these phones directly in NetBox, including all of the port assignments that they're connected to?
So we model just the interface that we're connecting to our switch. So that's all we really need to model, because once we know where the phone is plugged into, that's how we can know, how to bounce a port, for example, just by turning power on and off, or, getting stats from it. So the only interface that we're really modeling right now for these phones is just the one that's connected to the switch.
And as far as governance goes, you're making sure, like, you have a process to make sure that as a phone's deployed or as they're moved, that's all updated in NetBox.
Yeah, we have another system that actually kind of crawls our network and gathers all that kind of information into an assessment. So we can see, for example, on a snapshot basis, where are all the phones, and then we could kind of audit and true it up to see if, they've been moved around. Which is kind of a thing that the ballpark engineers often like to make sure that people haven't moved their phones around, for sure.
So it's a manual process, though. You're automatically crawling, you're doing LLDP or CDP, figuring out where they are, and then somebody by hand would be updating that.
No, all of it's automated. I mean, so we have a commercial product that crawls our network and sticks it into its database, and then we have another set of automation tools that take that data and do a comparative to see whether or not it's correct in NetBox. And if it's out of sync, then it will true it up or report it to us, so we can decide whether or not, if it was moved, that it should have been moved, or if it hasn't, been moved, we can kind of report an audit in sync.
I see.
And then, yeah, all of those are all automated processes or at least tools that an engineer can run so they're not manually pointing and clicking for sure.
And as far as modeling which port the phone is connected to, what are you using in NetBox? Is it like a tag, or how are you designating that port's in use?
Yeah, I can show you that part. So if we were to look at a given phone, for example, this one, you can see like I just modeled this as a VoIP phone, and on the interfaces, I can see like, I just have an interface called PoE, just for the sake of argument. And then I can see how the cable relationship is made here, to the device and the interface that it's on.
Oh, so you actually are modeling your phones in NetBox as endpoints.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's, and
And
we're
it's
doing
that-
the same thing with the PDUs. Yeah, like the PDUs, we're doing the same thing with the PDUs for the power bot as well. Yeah.
Nice. Great. Thanks.
Cool. So we got one more hand up. Ryan, we'll go ahead, but let's hold any more questions if we can. We'll probably have some time at the end. And if we do, we can try and open that back up for more questions. So Ryan, go ahead.
That's a quick one. Is your Slack Chatops integration a NetBox plugin, or is it just a standalone script for each little bot?
It's a standalone app for sure. It's not a NetBox plugin.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on and showing us some of that. I know I'm a big baseball fan, so anytime I can just take a little peek behind the curtain, especially when it's technology, I really appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Up next is going to be Jeroen. I hope I got that right. Jeroen van Bemmel. And we're going to be getting into improving automated provisioning workflows with NetBox. But I won't steal too much of your thunder. I'll let you go ahead with your presentation.
All right, can you see this?
Yes, coming through.
All right. So hello, welcome. My name is Jeroen van Bemmel. I'm with Nokia, and I was asked or invited to come and share some of the things we've been doing with NetBox recently. So for most people, they may know Nokia from the phones, illustrated here with a popular game. But we actually do have, these days, we have data center equipment as well. For example, this switch over here, this is a D2. And so we have customers that are asking us, hey, we have NetBox, can we add or model your Nokia network devices in our system? And until recently, the answer unfortunately was no. But with some little help and little effort, we've been adding our devices, modeling devices in NetBox, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. So these devices, they're actually based on merchant silicon.
Jeroen, just so you're aware, we're not actually seeing your slides advanced. We're seeing basically your whole PowerPoint.
Can you see it like this?
Yeah, we see that advance.
Okay. No. All right, sorry about that. So the devices, our network devices are based on merchant silicon, and the differentiator, what makes them different, is in the software part. So on there you have an operating system which we call SR Linux. It's basically Linux based, and it's designed to be open, so we can easily add things like the items we're going to be talking about here. So I have 3 quick snippets topics for today, from more concrete to more future looking. So first I'm going to be talking about how we can add Nokia devices to NetBox and model them in NetBox. Then I'm going to show you quickly in what I call an agent-based discovery prototype, to automate the population of NetBox using those models from point 1. And the third is a more future-looking idea for a QR code scanning plugin idea. And for that, I'm going to ask for help from the community. So here's some screenshots of the model that we added. So I added a couple of devices there. I'm assuming you're familiar with NetBox. So this is actually contributed to the community device type library. So you can see on the left, there's different device types for the different devices. And these are modular devices. So there is power units and fan units that you can have, and you can have different types of those, front to back, back to front. So I try to model all of those and make it consistent with what's already being done in that box. As you can see on the top right, the bottom right, where as Jeremy was talking about, so I also added or uploaded images for the front and the back of the devices, because I think it's nice if you can really visualize the racks that you have. And I would say it's a work in progress. I understand there's a new refactored version of the tool coming out with those images added, and not too many vendors have them today. But we we make them available, and we're happy to work with the community to make that work nicely and populate that into the into NetBox so that customers and users can visualize their systems. For the provisioning, so once you have the model and you can put it in, you can express it in NetBox. I think it's nice if you can automate the discovery or the population of those devices into the database. And last week we actually had a call where some people from NetBox from the community were looking at like an off-box type of provisioning flow or prototype. And this is similar to that. This is a variation to that, but this is what I would call an agent, or you can say a Python script that runs on each device. And so when the device comes up for the first time through a ZTP, zero-touch provisioning workflow, it will go and use the NetBox API to populate NetBox with its data. And in the prototype, that's of course the accurate device model that you have. There's different models. It will tell NetBox which type it is. It will report its management IP, and then the number and the type of power modules and installed fan modules. So I think that's pretty neat. I think this I think this is possible also on other vendors. I haven't seen it in combination with NetBox yet, but I would invite everybody and invite feedback, and also if people like this idea, I would invite the other vendors to do the same, so we can really make it easy for people to get started with NetBox and populate it with the correct data. One thing that's missing, and which I think is pretty critical, is the rack location, right? So where exactly is that device populated? And this agent won't be able to do that because it doesn't have the physical data to tell that. So for that part, we were thinking, well, there's these QR code or barcodes on devices that you can scan, and customers have actually asked us about this. Hey, can we not scan these barcodes and use that to populate NetBox? And in Nokia case, it's a data matrix format, but I think again, most vendors will have some kind of a data a barcode on their devices that you could use for this purpose. And so there's a excuse me, illustration there, and I built what I call an alpha version prototype, what it could look like. So there's an HTML5 library that I found that can do the QR provisioning, the QR scanning, and you could populate it into NetBox and make a plugin so that you can provision that. And this example screenshot here, the idea would be that you go to a particular rack, so you open the correct rack, and then you use your device, a mobile device, to scan the barcode, and then that device would get added to that specific rack. And this is something we would need some help, or we could use some help from the community. I'm not very familiar with with NetBox and especially front end, the UI, how it's all built and what's the best way to do it. So if there are people that could help with that, it would be really appreciated. And lastly, so again, I think the agent, the either on box or off box, that can take care of like things like serial numbers and device types, and it could be complemented with this physical location aspect through the QR code. So one way to do that would be to have a QR code on every rack or even on every slot in a rack, and then as a workflow, scan that QR code scan the device, and then that way populate NetBox with the correct device in the correct location. I believe that's my my 7 minutes. I open the call for questions, discussion.
Jeroen, that is very cool. I like the idea of having that agent running directly on the switch. I've seen that with server provisioning before, where a server will phone home into NetBox. I've not seen that done from a network device before. That is a really cool implementation. Ryan, looks like you got a question here. You're on a roll. What do you got?
Really, just two comments. One being for the input of data, the QR code scanning, that's definitely a new interesting take. Just to bring it to your attention, for the kind of marking assets with a printed QR code, there is a plugin for that. So just I'll share that if anyone's interested, called NetBox QR code. Put it in chat. And then the other piece is more so kind of like how Jordan was mentioning, an agent on the box and pulling data. It reminds me very much like Salt and how you can install a lot of the agents on a lot of the network gear as well. So good job, interesting take. Definitely appreciate the presentation.
All right, and yes, I am aware of the QR code. Actually, this alpha plugin was based off the existing NetBox QR code. It's just that it does it has a different take on QR codes. I think it produces QR codes rather than reading them, so it doesn't really do this. But yes, the idea would be to add to the existing QR code plugin rather than build a new one, if possible.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Wouldn't it be great if we got to a point where Panduit and APC and all the rack manufacturers came up with a way to allow switches to self-identify what rack unit they were in? That'd be cool. Maybe one day.
Maybe.
I'm still waiting for LLDP over power.
One day.
One
and
day.
then there'll be 5 different versions on how to implement it, like everything else.
Of course.
There's an XKCD on that.
Yeah, relevant XKCD. There always is. Awesome. So Jeroen, thank you so much for the presentation. I believe we're going to try and make these slides available afterwards as well. So look out for that when we start just advertising, the replays and everything. Really appreciate your time. Before we start with Arthur, who's going to get in, thank you, Jonathan, for sharing that XKCD in the chat. Before we get into Arthur, who's going to, he's a NetBox Labs employee, and he's going to get into the new Python API client. I'm going to share out the survey here. And I mentioned this earlier. It's a real quick survey just based on the feedback from this call. Just see how you found it. And we'll mention it again at the end. But if you don't have enough time to stick through all the way, definitely would appreciate you taking a moment to fill that out. So with that said, Arthur, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, and let's get this sneak peek of the beta coming up.
Yeah, great. Can everybody hear me?
Loud and clear.
So can you see my screen here?
Also loud and clear.
This is basically, this is a new Python API client for NetBox. What I'm going to do is present like the API, how you call it, and then compare it to PyNetBox, which is the existing API client. So this is a very simple thing where we, just setting up to call the API. I've imported JSON here just for pretty printing. You don't actually need that. So what you do is you just do a NetBox client, you give the URL you're calling to, and then the token which you generate from within NetBox. And then this would just be, I'm calling sites here. So I just take that NetBox client, I call DCMI sites, and all is just like all the values from that. And I'm just going to print those out. If we run that, you can see here the JSON printed data and stuff from all the sites in demo data. Now this one and stuff is, again, just setting it up and stuff, but just showing the different types of API calls you could make. So this one is a list that would return the paginated list results from it. So you can get, so all returns all of them. List just returns the paginated. You can also do filtering on it. So like if you only want those sites within a certain region, you just give it the region ID, filter on that. Get, if you want one item, this is the ID 24. Create, you just give the values and stuff. You provide the required fields and stuff, and for the site stuff, that would be the name and the slug. And then you can include all the others. We have bulk create. You can create a list, an array value, a dictionary, and then just do a bulk create on all the items. And then again, like you have update and bulk update, delete, bulk delete. So pretty much all the functionality is there. And all the like DCIM sites, that's if you just follow along NetBox, it uses the NetBox naming convention for all the different values. Then here I'm going to show like the different Pi NetBox and stuff. If you actually look like most of the regular calls and stuff, it just pretty much looks like a one-to-one mapping of Pi NetBox. So here's the setup in the two cases. This is the NetBox one, this is the Pi NetBox. And you can see both of them, you just give a URL, the token. Then the list, here is just this is the one I just showed and stuff for the NetBox Python. Filtered list, the Pi NetBox uses a filter, but in the NetBox Python and stuff, you just still use the list. Both of them have the all, both of them have the get, create. So as you can see, it's pretty much it looks pretty much the same at this point with the one-to-one. Now, where you get different and stuff is this last part. I wanted to go into the code. So you see two different things here. Let me resize this a bit. So I'll call out two things here where you start getting into the differences when you call them and stuff. This one, when you reference in the NetBox Python, when you reference the data fields, you do it by array notation. So this would be like site underscore name to get the name. In Pi NetBox, you would use the dot notation. So it's like site dot name. And then in update calls and stuff, in the NetBox Python, when you call the update, you provide the fields that you want to update, and it returns the record values. So in this case, we want to update the name, and I'm just putting a test on the end of it and stuff. In Pi NetBox, so you have a record, and in that record, you would update the name, and then you would submit that record in the API call. So in this case, it would be sites update sites. Now, that sure showed the difference and stuff. One of the first questions people have was like, why? Why did we think about rewriting a library if it looks pretty much the same and stuff? It really comes down to two things with maintainability and flexibility. So the maintainability, the API client really does two things. It just takes the data from NetBox, and then in the case of Pi NetBox, it converts it into some data structures for user access. And one of the things that they both do, they get the data from NetBox, but the problem with the Pi NetBox when it does that data conversion, that's where a lot of the bugs and stuff have come into play. So recently and stuff with the NetBox 3.3, where it changed the cable types and stuff, that ended up breaking Pi NetBox. The NetBox Python and stuff, since it doesn't do the data conversion, it should work with pretty much any past and future NetBox versions. So no matter what changes are in NetBox and stuff, it should pretty much work. If a new API endpoint is added, it would be really quick and stuff to add it into it. Also, flexibility-wise, people have asked about, some of them asked about adding like a data typing to it. And that would actually be a little bit difficult in Pi NetBox. It's doable, but in NetBox Python and stuff, it would be much more straightforward and stuff to add that on top in a separate library. So really that is my presentation. I know I went through it pretty quick and stuff. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
That was really good, Arthur. I like that you stole my question, which was going to be the why. So I appreciate you anticipating that. Ryan, looked like you had your hand up for a second there. Did you still have a question?
No, I just left it on from before, sorry.
Okay, cool. So for those of you who aren't aware, that the Python bit here is really a wrapper that allows you to programmatically interact with the API a little bit easier through Python. So if you're not into scripting yet, if you're just getting into your network automation journey, you'll find packages like that help you interact with NetBox Pythonically. I think that's a word. So those are really cool things to check out. And we do have a couple questions going on here in chat. Mr. Schulman, did you want to come on and ask those, or would you prefer if I take them?
Yeah, no, I can ask them. The first one was, does this client support async IO?
Not currently. That's something that could definitely be added. Pretty straightforward and stuff if people want that.
Yeah, I mean, mostly everything I've been doing has been async IO based. It makes things a billion times faster. And so kind of like once you go down the async IO path, you kind of have to do async IO almost everywhere. And so having client library support async IO as an option has been, really helpful if it's possible.
Yeah, definitely
then-
could look at it.
Yeah. And then the second question I had was, does this client download the Swagger spec, the Open API spec from the server to formulate its programmatic interface, or is these objects and methods kind of coded into the client directly?
Yeah, it doesn't download the Swagger spec. It doesn't depend on that. So it just does it directly.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. Brian had a question of speed between Pi NetBox and NetBox client. Did you want to come on and get into that a little bit, Brian, or are you happy with me summarizing?
That's pretty much it.
All right.
Just curious if you've done any performance testing.
Yeah, it should actually be pretty much basically comparable. I don't think that you would see really any, performance differences between the two, because they're really just like calling NetBox and getting it over the API. There's in pagination and stuff, a little bit more flexibility in the new one. You can just set the limits and stuff and control it a little bit more granular.
Awesome. Any other questions for Arthur? Very good. So that pretty much wraps us up for this month. I really want to thank everyone for joining us. The survey is still in there from a little bit earlier that Maggie had posted. We'd really appreciate it if you all could take a moment to fill that out. As we're starting to wind down here, I want to give a couple virtual high fives out there to Arthur, Jeroen, and Jeremy for joining us and taking time out of their workdays to present. If this is something that you would like to do, if you have something cool that you want to show off in NetBox, it doesn't need to be an intense chat-based integration. It doesn't need to be beta code. If you've got a cool tip, a cool trick, just a way that you like to use NetBox that you'd like to show off, please reach out to us. We'd love to have anybody from the community on who can show off and take a little time to brag. That's always fun. Also, I'd like to give a high five, and Jeremy, maybe I could get you to come on and just touch a bit on what Rodrigo Magnari is doing in regards to the feature request.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out a quick thing to highlight. So Rodrigo had this idea to propose essentially a peer review workflow for adding objects in NetBox. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to spend a lot of time on it myself, owing to all of just where we are right now with the release cycle, with everything concentrating on 3.5. But it looks very promising. Just wanted to kind of highlight that as a community item to provide, asking people to provide input and their perspectives on how it might best work, and to kind of encourage that work to progress. So if you want to check that out, I think I put where did I drop the number for that? Yeah, it's feature request number 11942. So if you're interested in that, go check it out and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. For anyone who is interested in proposing an idea, looks like we're trying. Yeah, we have it out there. A link in chat from Kylie. Thank you so much, Kylie. If you have a demo idea that you'd like to submit. Thank you, everyone on the NetBox Lab side, for helping put this together. This has been a lot of fun, and it looks like we still have a lot of people here, so it sounds like it was pretty engaging. At this point, we have around 15 minutes left, so that runs the itinerary that we had prepared.